You're finally making a good salary, feeling financially stable, and then all of a sudden your car breaks down. Do you use an emergency fund? Do you even have one? Welcome, new and returning Money Buddies. Today, I am going to help you figure out how to calculate your emergency fund, where to save your emergency fund, and then when should you use it. I'm excited today to help everyone feel more confident with one of the most essential areas of advice that we all get told to do. We all get told we should have an emergency fund, right? We all feel like we should have an emergency fund, but it often gets put on the back burner because we aren't told exactly how to save for or use this emergency fund that we all need to have. So this is going to be your go-to episode to know exactly how to save for an emergency fund, when to use it, and how to use it. And I know I've had to use my emergency fund many times, including recently for a car issue. So this is going to be a great, realistic, and practical episode for all of you listening. Let's get into it. As we get started here, I want to mention one simple tip that I'm going to share at the end of the episode that is an easy way that you can plan ahead for an emergency. And it's going to make dealing with an emergency a whole lot easier on your wallet. But let's get started today with the problem around emergency funds. The first quote I have here is that nearly 1 in 4 Americans, 24% of us, have no emergency savings at all. This is a massive issue. Having a good income doesn't protect you from emergencies. I know all of us, we're starting to work good jobs. We're trying to figure out what to do with our money. But as your income grows, so do your obligations, your monthly expenses, and potential emergencies. No savings for emergencies will lead to financial stress, potentially credit card debt, maybe even payday loans. We want to avoid those, right? And more stress. There can be legitimate physical stress that happens to you. You can get sick more often. All of that can come from financial stress, which can come from not having an emergency savings, especially when you need it. I found a study from Bankrate that shows whether people have no emergency savings all the way up to enough to cover 6 months of expenses or more. And their study shows that 54% of people have no savings or not enough to cover 3 months of expenses. So that's where I want to start us today. The fact that most people don't have an emergency savings account. And now, Money Buddies, I know you're not like everyone else with money. I know you're trying hard to be really good with your money, so you probably have some amount of emergency savings. And if you do have an emergency fund, great job. Give yourself a pat on the back. This episode is still going to be a good one for you because we're going to talk about how to use your emergency fund in a little bit. But if you're like the majority of people and you don't have a healthy emergency fund, it's okay. You have the chance right now to use this episode as a turning point and set yourself up for success if something unfortunate were to happen in the future. Use this episode as your turning point and let's get moving forward and let's talk about how you can start to save for an emergency fund now and get out of that majority of people who don't have enough emergency savings. Let's talk about how to save for your emergency fund. And this quote that I found from Fidelity was a great one. They suggest to start by saving $1,000 and then aim for that 3 to 6 month mark. Now, of course, $1,000 isn't enough. You should start with something simple and easy to build momentum because that $1,000 isn't going to cover a big job loss or a giant emergency, but it honestly is probably going to be enough for a smaller issue that might come up. But the main thing is that it's going to help you start building some habits. Now, if you're single, you might be comfortable with 3 months of savings, but if you have a spouse, kids, a mortgage, or if you're worried about your job stability, you might feel more comfortable with 6 months of savings. So where do you keep this money now that you're starting to save it or you're starting to realize how much you need to save? Or maybe you have that $1,000 that you want to get into your emergency fund right now. Well, that emergency fund savings needs to go into a high yield savings account. 2 great options are Ally Bank or CIT Bank. They may not be the highest at any one moment. You may find one out there that's a little bit higher, but they are the highest over the long term. There will be some banks out there that you're going to see with an insanely high rate. They're probably trying to trick you with a crazy high rate for 60 days or something like that. They're trying to offer promotions because they know how hard it is to get people to change banks. So be cautious of those ones that have a promotional rate for 60 or 90 days because it's likely going to plummet after that promotional period. And you're probably saying, well, this 3 to 6 months of savings is going to be a lot of money. Do I need to invest it? Should I have it in the market? Is it worth it just sitting in a savings account? Don't invest it. You don't need to invest it. You don't need to worry about that because guess what? Bad things tend to happen in bunches. A job loss is usually during a market downturn or a tough economic time, and you don't want to see your savings down and risk selling at a loss. So keep it safe in a high yield savings account where you're not going to lose your principal or the money you're putting in the account. And remember, emergency funds aren't about maximizing returns. They're about safety and security. And a good mental reframe when you're thinking about your emergency savings is think about it as a bill. Think about it as a debt that you owe to yourself, because that's going to help you move a whole lot faster on saving this money. It's going to motivate you a lot. Because if we reframe our mindset to think that we're in debt to a future emergency, it's going to unlock that area in our mind that enables us to power through getting out of debt. You know how when you stare at that auto loan or whatever, you just think, can I get out of this debt right now? How can I get out of this faster? If you do that with your emergency fund savings, it's going to become a whole lot easier to save for that emergency fund. And the other key thing you could do here is to trim your spending. But you're going to want to stick around to the end, because trimming your spending is the simple tip that I'm going to dive into a little deeper when we get to the end of the episode. We're going to set you up for success so that your wallet doesn't have to take such a beating the next time you're in an emergency. But one common mistake that I see with emergency funds is not knowing when it's okay to use the emergency fund. And you just try to make it always work without actually using the savings that is there for an emergency. So I found 3 key questions that I like from Goldman Sachs. The first question says, is this expense or event unexpected? The second one says, is this expense necessary? And the third one says, is this something urgent that requires you to act immediately? This is a great framework to help you decide whether you need to use your emergency fund or not, especially the last one. If you don't have to act immediately, take a deep breath and put a 24-hour pause in place to see if you can wait on this expense. This pause will allow you to gather your thoughts and figure out what's going on and really slow down and take a breath, because maybe it's an emergency that can be solved without money or without taking a big hit to your savings if you just relax. Who knows? But if it isn't immediately urgent, take a deep breath, because taking a pause can be one of the most valuable things we do with our money, whether it's spending or whether it's using our emergency fund. But if you do answer yes to those 3 questions, this is your permission to spend your emergency fund. Please use it. Get yourself out of the bind that you find yourself in. Don't overthink it. If it's urgent, immediate, and necessary and unexpected, use your emergency fund. It's okay to use it. I've had to use it before. It's not fun, and you rebuild it back up pretty quickly, and it's okay. Next, I'm going to take us into some real-world application on how you can actually use your emergency fund, save for it, and how to actually spend it. I'm going to walk through my situation that I have used before to actually utilize our emergency fund. So look forward to that here in just a second. So let's go through a real world scenario with an emergency fund and walk you through how to use it and how to save for it and how to actually pay for expenses using your emergency fund. So imagine you're making about $60,000 a year, you're working in your first job, and it's starting to feel like you have more money than you know what to do with. You've never seen a job make this much money. You feel like you're on top of the world financially. You could do whatever you want with money. But if you don't have an emergency fund, or if you keep kicking it down the road, something will happen, and it's going to make you wish that you had an emergency fund. Imagine yourself in this situation, and imagine not having an emergency fund for a moment. That's where my wife and I found ourselves. Thankfully, we were able to pretty quickly, using the tips I've given in this episode, build the emergency fund before we really needed it. And I'm going to share exactly how we did it, how I manage it, and how we spent using our emergency fund. But first, I want to share some statistics about emergency funds to help you get an understanding of why it's so important to have our emergency fund plan in place. From Bankrate, they share that only 41% of U.S. adults would pay for an unexpected emergency expense from their savings. 70% of adults would be worried that if they lost their primary job, they wouldn't have enough emergency savings to cover their immediate living expenses. 1/3 of adults say that they have more credit card debt than emergency savings. So let's get you out of the side of the equation that's worried and stressed about savings, and let's get you onto the confident side of the equation with your emergency fund. And let's walk you through how you can set up your savings, build strong habits, and use your emergency fund to stay sane when it comes to all these ups and downs that we have to deal with in life. So setting up the emergency fund, how do you implement this? Well, you can start by opening a high yield savings account. Calculate how much you can save every single month, and then set a goal and work hard towards that goal. This is what my wife and I did. We found a high yield savings account with Ally Bank. That's the one that we like. We figured out how much we needed. We set a goal, and now it's in a bucket at Ally Bank. So a key thing here is to make sure this money is set aside outside of your normal account. This is very essential, and it's going to help you keep your savings safe from potential spending. You're going to keep your money safe because you can always transfer it within a day or two out of that emergency fund. But I want to again emphasize the importance of having your emergency fund in a separate account away from your main spending account. Because trust me, if you need money to spend and it's sitting right there, right next to your checking account in the same bank or whatever, you're going to transfer it and you're going to spend it. So make sure your emergency fund is out of sight and out of mind where you're not going to touch it. But how do you calculate how much to put in there? The second step, right? Opening a high yield savings account is easy. Calculating it can be a little bit trickier. And you've heard me say it before, but you need to start tracking your expenses. Knowing how much 3 to 6 months of expenses is going to make this a whole lot easier. And you can guess on this number, but please don't. Don't try to guess, because I track all of these numbers in my own life and I will still guess incorrectly. So here's a quick shortcut to figure out your 3 to 6 months of expenses. Look at your last 3 months of bank statements or connect them to a free tracking app or whatever it may be, and then average your spending. It's not a perfect number, but it's better than guessing, and it's going to get you a whole lot closer to the right number, and it'll help you get started today rather than waiting until you have the perfect tracking system in place for 3 months to actually start saving towards your emergency fund. This is going to at least help you start to align those goalposts and get them very close to accurate. And then as you continue to track your expenses and work hard towards understanding your financial situation, then you're going to be able to bring them in more and more narrow and find that exact dollar amount that you're comfortable with having in your emergency fund. And now that you've set the goal, it's time to start building the habits and start working towards this goal. Here's the key thing: automation. We all love automation, right? Let it work automatically in the background. You can either set up an automatic transfer from your regular account to your high yield savings account, or even better, go to your work's HR department tomorrow or whenever you work next and ask them for your direct deposit form and set up an automatic deposit straight from your paycheck into your high yield savings account. Because if you don't have to see the money or transfer it yourself, it's going to be a whole lot easier to stick to this plan that you've set up for yourself and then work hard towards this goal. Find extra money that you can throw into your emergency fund savings. Working hard towards this goal is going to really help you feel empowered with your financial situation. And one of the ways that you can work hard is by understanding how you're spending money, because maybe you can trim back on your spending and you can put it into your savings first. That's going to be extremely helpful because it can allow you to find the money to save for your emergency fund before you have to commit to all sorts of side hustles or a random job to make enough money. Because if you consider just relocating the money you're already making, you're going to get there a whole lot quicker. If you can commit a large chunk of your paycheck to go directly to your emergency fund, you're going to get there so much faster than you realize. And you're also just going to improve your spending situation as well by slightly limiting how much you're getting every single month to spend in your checking. So redirect your money to your savings before you put it into a general spending fund. And that's the whole idea about pay yourself first, right? Build up this emergency fund first, and you're going to be doing great. And you're going to feel empowered and excited and know that you're doing something positive to improve your financial situation. But here it goes. Here comes the emergency, right? What do we do now? We get a flat tire on our car. How do we deal with this? Well, you're going to feel a whole lot more prepared because you have your savings ready to go. I know for my wife and I, this is the easy part, spending the money. Once you can get past the little bit of a mental hurdle that it is to actually spend your savings, you're going to realize how nice it is to have this emergency fund. So how do you spend it? Well, here's a breakdown of how I handle emergencies with our emergency fund. We pay for the expense on a credit card. We then transfer the amount of money for that expense to our checking account that we pay our credit cards out of. And then we send the money straight to the credit card so that it's paid off and it's out of the way. No need to wait until the statement generates or the next bill to pay it off. Pay it off right away and move on quickly from the emergency. Get it out of your head and get on from it, because this is a great chance to start rebuilding your emergency fund. And this is where you can see it as like a loan from your savings or a debt that you need to repay so that you can rebuild that emergency fund quickly. You'll have a chance now to cut back on some spending and quickly refill that emergency fund. It's a fun little game to play to see how quickly can I build my emergency fund back up. But it doesn't have to be that hard to actually use it. And guess what? Here's one of my favorite things about the emergency fund. It cuts your emergencies in half, because that whole quick little story that I just told about putting it on a credit card and then paying off the expense right away, that's it. it cuts your emergencies in half. Because, for example, with the car emergency, instead of a car emergency and a financial emergency and a potential job emergency because you can't get it fixed quickly, you only have the car emergency. And honestly, that's just going to become a slight inconvenience because you're going to have the money to pay to get it fixed quickly. Because now, after listening to this episode, you know how to start saving for an emergency fund and you know how to use it as well. And I want to share here a story that I heard from a fellow money buddy. They shared with me that money was so stressful. They weren't sure how they could even handle an emergency, but we were able to get them set up with that automatic savings into an emergency fund so that they at least had a little bit of cash ready for an emergency. And that goes a long way because it's fairly unlikely that your emergency is going to require a full 3 to 6 months of expenses, but it might. So we do have to be careful there. But sometimes emergencies are just a few $100s here or a few $100s there, and they're just things you don't expect. So then you're going to be able to use your emergency fund, and having the savings on hand is what the fellow money buddy shared with me was tremendously helpful. They were able to get it automatically set up in the background. So when one of those slight emergency type expenses came up, they paid for it and they were on their way rebuilding their emergency fund and all was well. So let's get you to a place where you can feel comfortable and confident the next time a financial emergency happens. We're going to wrap up this episode here next, and I do have one more great piece of advice to share with you. So today's main action item is to open a high yield savings account and transfer your emergency fund into it, or get started with $100 today to start saving for your emergency fund. But the hardest part with your emergency fund, it's getting started. So I'm super excited to share with you here in just a second how you can plan ahead for an emergency and be prepared for the unexpected. In just a second, I'm going to share the exact steps that you can do to be prepared. But first, I need you to do me a huge favor and subscribe to the podcast. I'm starting to see more and more listeners on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so be sure to subscribe there so you don't miss any future episodes. And now's the tip you've all been waiting for: the bare bones budget. This is such a fun experiment to do with your next budget. It's going to help you figure out exactly how little you can live on and how much you need for just 1 month. And this is going to be your safety net. And honestly, it's going to allow you to make your emergency fund a little bit smaller than you might think, because you're going to have a true sense of how much one bare bones month of your life is going to cost. Because when we're in an emergency, a whole lot of our expenses suddenly become unnecessary. So figure out your bare bones budget now so that when you need it, you can deploy it in an emergency. I hope you enjoyed that extra little tip there at the end about the bare bones budget. But what questions do you have about an emergency fund? I love helping people get their emergency fund set up because it brings so much peace of mind. And I want to offer each and every one of you listening today my free emergency fund planning guide. I'll send you the guide. Included in this guide is an emergency fund calculator and a step-by-step checklist like we talked about today to get this all set up. In order to get the guide, you're going to have to go over to the show notes, scroll down and send me an email letting me know that you want the guide, and I'll make sure to send it right back to you. Let me know what phase you're currently at with your emergency fund, whether it's just getting started or if you're ready to use it in the event of an emergency. I would love to learn more about how our community of money buddies fares against the rest of America when it comes to saving for an emergency. And that does it for today's episode. And next week, we have another phenomenal episode coming up. You know how so often we get told that we just need to save more money or stop going out to eat and it's going to fix all of our financial problems? You know how money is different for young adults now than it was for our parents or grandparents? Well, next week is going to feature our very first guest on financial planning for young adults, and we're going to talk about how money is harder for young adults now. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and thank you for listening to this week's episode of Financial Planning for Young Adults. I'm your host, Skylar Fleming. Have a great week. And hey, quick heads up. This podcast, it's meant to be educational and it's for entertainment purposes. It's not personalized financial advice for your specific situation. So before you go out and make any big money moves, make sure you chat with a qualified financial professional who knows your full financial picture.